Thursday, January the 10th. Lake level is bouncing right around 905. It's about 904 3/4 right now. Yesterday it was about 905, but it's been bouncing right around there for the last week. We've been getting some pretty good rain the last day or two. I don't know if it's enough to make the lake level come up. Water temperatures actually really cooled down quite a bit. It depends where you're out on the lake. The upper end of the rivers, like up by Bridgeport, up above Cape Fear, this past weekend had ice all the way across the lake. The upper White River, upper Long Creek, a lot of ice way up in the upper rivers. But the main lake's still, about 46, 47 degrees. I fished down at Bull Shoals and Table Rock this past weekend. It was kind of fun down there at Bull Shoals. Every time we go down there, I bring walleye home for my wife. We caught as many walleyes as we did bass. But as far as on Table Rock, we caught them pretty good Saturday on a jerkbait. And we had one decent fish on a secondary point out of submerged cedar trees, but most of the other fish came on secondary points back into creeks, and the fish seemed to be relating more to rock than they did trees, which is, it was kind of in a cloudy, overcast days, and usually on the sunnier days, the fish tend to relate more to the trees because as the water warms up, the trees will hold a little bit more heat in them, and actually they'll use the trees for ambush points, and like the corners of the docks they'll use for ambush points. So when it's cloudy like that, a lot of times the fish will be out rowing. So they were more out in the open water. Seemed like they're just relating more to rock, and they weren't that deep. For the most part, I was keeping the boat 18 to 20 foot. So most of the fish were coming, 8 to 10 foot deep of water, and they were 5 or 6 foot deep suspended down. Now I understand there's been a lot of deep fish being caught now on a drop shot and a spoon. I haven't done that the last few times I've been out. I've been throwing an Alabama rig and a jerkbait. A couple of my most favorite things to throw. And with that water cooling down, I hadn't been out since Sunday, but I'll get out tomorrow and throughout the weekend. So hopefully that Alabama rig bite's been a little bit better. Now on the jerkbait, I've been throwing medium bill baits. I've been throwing some Smithwick rogues, nothing fancy, no custom painted ones. I actually did as good the other day on this one. I think it's called a Ghost, just a 4.5 inch Smithwick rogue. And on the Norman Flake Spro, I haven't done very much on the Mega Bass, and probably a lot of the reason I haven't been throwing very much. I've been throwing the Spro and Smithwick more than anything. Now down there at Bull Shoals this past weekend, we really struggled. We caught a few walleye and a few bass on the stick bait, but for the most part we really struggled till later in the day. And we got to checking in the very backs of the creeks, the last little channel swing where there would be like 25 or 30 foot left in the creek, and where that channel would come up against the steep bank. And we started throwing some jigs, some football jigs, and we got onto them pretty good. And then that worked again for me on Table Rock. But they seemed to be anywhere from 18 to 25 foot deep. The bite was really subtle, but you just had to fish the jig real slow. It seemed like as it was coming off them ledges, as the bait would free fall, a lot of times it never would hit the next ledge. All of a sudden you'd just see your line moving a little bit if you'd have any pressure. The good thing about it was the fish were biting it pretty good. If you didn't pick up on the bite, they were holding on to it and swimming it. And if you did miss it, set the hook and miss the fish, you could just set your rod right back, aim your rod back towards the fish, give it a little slack, and a lot of times the fish would come back for it. So that was good. But the two jigs that seemed to work the best for us, we were throwing a 1/2 ounce pig sticker, and the colors was a Magic Craw and a Triple X. They're kind of like a watermelon candy colored skirt. This one's a little bit darker. And as far as for the trailers, I was throwing a Zoom Speed Craw, and we was also throwing a Twin Tail Chompers. Didn't really seem to matter which trailer or which jig. But I did try some brown and orange, and we did catch, I think, one fish on a PBJ, but these two colors were the best for us. I'm going to show you a couple little deals on the Alabama rig. Right now, what you want to do is get out there on the main lake points and some of the secondary points where the water's real deep, anywhere from 60 to 80 foot, where there's submerged timber. And what you want to do, excuse me, is get that A-rig down there. You know, you need to keep an eye on your electronics, and now where them fish are getting up suspended with these Lowrance electronics, you can actually see the fish, how deep they are. So if I see the fish about 20 to 25, that A-rig, if you've got, you know, 1/4 ounce heads on it, it'll drop down about 2 feet a second. So I'll give it about a 10 to 15 count before I start reeling, and just slow roll it like you would a spinnerbait. Now a lot of times, you know, I fish an open hook. And if you'll notice, these got 5 hooks on them. Missouri, you can only have 3 hooks. These are some rigs that I was throwing in Arkansas, in both shoals. But, you know, I had been throwing it on open hook quite a bit because I feel I get a better hookup. But I lose a lot of them, you know, when you're dropping down to fish over them treetops. Now, some guys I fished with last weekend down in Arkansas, you know, had pretty slick little setup. This is an A-rig that he was making. And see, it's got 5 spinnerbait blades up on the wire, and again, it's got 5 hooks on it. But you'll notice that these are Texas rigged here. So these will come through the brush and the treetops a lot better. Good old Alabama rigs get hung on everything. But what you can do is get a swim bait hook, you know, that's got the weight on the shank of the hook. The only problem with this is, without a hitchhiker on it, you know, every time you change your bait, you got to take the hook off. Now, if you take a little hitchhiker, this is what I use on my dummy baits a lot of times, but just take that hitchhiker, hook it on the eyelet of the hook, then you can screw just like you would a shaky head or your hitchhiker, screw the bait right onto the hitchhiker. Not as easy done as said sometimes. Okay. That's on there good enough for now. Then you can just take and, you know, Texas rig it. You're all set, you're weedless. Now without the hitchhiker on there, what you'd have to do anytime you'd have to change your bait, see, you would have to take the hook off the Alabama rig, throw your bait up on there, and it depends how big a weight you got. Sometimes the bait can be hard to slip up over the weight, you know, and then you can rig it weedless like that. But with that little hitchhiker on the end of the hook like that, it's a really slick setup. And something to do this time of year too, if you're not getting out there doing a lot of fishing, this time of year I like to go through a lot of my tackle, and you know, I try to keep everything in the boat that I think I'm going to need that day. You know, like where I'm throwing rogues, I won't bring all my Smithwick boxes and my Spros and Megabasses. What I'll do is I carry almost all my tackle in plain old 3700 boxes, because just, I don't care what kind of boat's made out there, all the boats are designed for your planos to rack. I don't know of a boat out there that their storage systems aren't built around the plano boxes. They're always the same size, they're really uniform. But instead of carrying, like I say, all the baits that I have in each kind, I'm just going to carry the ones that I think I'm going to use and kind of limit it down to 1 to maybe 2 boxes. You know, I've got my Lucky Crafts in here, my Spros, my Megabass, the colors that I think I'm going to use. And also I try to keep, I try to make sure all my hooks, all my baits are in good shape so that while I'm out there on the water, I'm not having to mess around changing hooks. So anything that's pretty much in the boat, I know it's got good sharp hooks and it's ready to fish. And you know, another reason you might want to keep your baits out of the boat, especially if your boat's outside, if it gets damp, you know, this time of year, you're not using it very much, not getting any air in there, a lot of your hooks and stuff are going to rust. So, you know, I keep my boat in the garage, but I still like to keep all my tackle organized into 3700 boxes and keep them labeled. That way, if I'm going out that day, I can just go over to the wall, pull what I think I'm going to need, put it in the box, and that way there I'm ready to go. But I'm also going to go out and do some deep fishing this weekend too. I understand there's some walleye being caught on spoons, as well as a lot of bass. So I'm going to see if I can't get on them deep fish and throw that A-rig a little bit. So till next week, good luck, good fishing.
Whoosh.